Welcome to Random and Memorable, a podcast from 1Password. I'm Matt Davey, 1Password's Chief Experience Officer.
I'm Sarah, one of the founders at 1Password.
I'm Rue, Head of Password Manager Development.
I'm Anna, the producer behind the show.
And we're the hosts behind Random and Memorable. Together, we offer up bi-weekly security advice, interview special guests from the cybersecurity community, and round up the latest security news in Watchtower Weekly. Plus, we may play a silly security game or two. So sit back and enjoy the show. So, Rue, you got an award, but no one knew it was actually Rue who was getting the award because it was under your real name.
Yeah.
It was very confusing.
Yes, last week at the annual company all hands celebration, I received an award for being an exemplary communicator, which I think is probably no surprise to anyone who listens to the show. And and Sarah was the host who was giving out the awards, and she announced the award and gave it to Michael Fay, and the chat lit up with who? So I don't know why we couldn't go with my internal company nickname, but it certainly rubbed some people the wrong way, myself included.
Can I say, though, Sarah, you did an absolutely fantastic job, and you had the hardest one out of everybody.
Yes.
Was it? That's so. I've had no feedback so far, other than the people that are there that have to tell you did good. So
yes, the professional hype people that you pay,
exactly.
that we pay to be around.
They said I did a great job.
Your hype crew that you take everywhere.
All entourage.
No, I think it was incredibly hard because, you had to wait for people to applaud, and no doubt there was some applause in the studio, but not a whole bunch.
Well, and I can't see the stream, and I couldn't see what was happening behind. I know that the screen was behind me, but then trying to figure out, am I standing on someone's face right now? Am I in the wrong location?
Sarah, I have to imagine that. So sorry for the listeners, because this is not making for great radio so far. The setup is Sarah is in a studio on a soundstage somewhere broadcasting to all of us, literally standing on a stage.
Yes.
Picture Tim Cook standing in the Steve Jobs Theater. It's that. And there's no audience. And so you have to present and project to an audience that is not there. I have to imagine that is just really awkward and odd.
It is strange. I think the other part is just I'm very self-conscious. I have very little confidence. And I'm really worried, everyone on the other side of the camera is being super hypercritical. And they're like, oh my goodness, she just said that instead of that. She got it wrong. Oh no. The one slide I messed up and I was like, oh God, the whole show's over. I might as well stop and quit. And then afterwards, when I said to Nicole, I was like, oh, I missed the one slide. And she's like, I didn't even notice it. You're fine. I was like, oh, okay. But yeah, just trying to make sure you're giving the right pauses. Okay, are people in the chat clapping right now? Move around, but don't move because you're blocked something. It was very and then all the names. Oh my goodness. I remember back when the company was less than 48 people, let alone only have Michael Fay. That was a nice, easy name to say. So I'm glad it seemed well. So that's good.
Right. We have had a listener reach out to the show to talk to us about the new Wallace and Gromit film. Have you both seen the excellent Wallace and Gromit film?
No.
I have not yet.
Okay. This, I think, is their best film. And I say that having grown up on the others. So they're sentimental, but this, I feel, was great. So essentially, Wallace, an inventor, makes a robot gnome, and then the Feathers McGraw character, who is a penguin disguised as a chicken, essentially breaks in to the computer network and breaches the login credentials and changes the command control of the production environment and deployment of these gnomes. And so I think, basically, Dave Rosencrantz has reached out and said it is essentially a film about cybersecurity, which I very much enjoy.
That's very cool. I like that. I think it takes a special kind of nerd to see that when you watch a film like that. But also I think it takes a special kind of nerd to have conceptualized a film like that. So very well done.
Yes. I think the level of detail in it is just incredible. Yeah, I highly recommend it. I don't think it's a kids movie.
Yeah, the best kids movies are not kids movies. That's as an adult, it's one of the things that I've really come to enjoy.
Do you want to add the guest tease from Rue?
Oh, yeah, I suppose. Sorry, I don't.
I was going to add that to my movie watching list, but you could add a guest tease in for the listeners, I suppose. I suppose they might want to have something to listen to.
Coming up on the show, and to kick off our new season, we have an excellent guest, as Emily Crose will be joining us a little later on to discuss her new book, Hack to the Future: How World Governments Relentlessly Pursue and Domesticate Hackers. This was genuinely a fun interview to do, and I love the storyline here, and I can't wait for you all to hear it.
All right. On that note, let's jump into some Watchtower Weekly. This is where we shine a spotlight on some of the security headlines from the last couple of weeks and share what we think of them. We often get depressed by the news, but occasionally we'll find something to poke fun at. So this week we have an interesting post from Wired, which claims you need to create a secret password with your family. So, as we know, AI, voice cloning and deepfakes are supercharging scams, and this Wired article dives into one method to protect your loved ones and yourself, which is to create secret code words to verify someone's identity in real time. Okay.
No, we've done this.
I think this is adding AI to a problem that already exists, which is if someone phones you up, there are words that you can say in order to be like, I'm in trouble, I'm not in trouble, that type of thing, which is very good to have regardless.
Like, this is like the little thing they used to teach the small kids. This used to be like big in the 80s where it was like, don't let someone pick you up if you don't have the family password. Like,
yes,
this is not new.
100%.
Yeah.
Good,
So there have been increasing calls for people, and particularly families, to create passphrases or passwords with each other. Late last year, the FBI issued a recommendation that people create a secret password or phrase with your family to verify their identity, and British bank Starling has also published guidelines on creating safe phrases with others. It's a simple, if not new, approach that can potentially be effective. For instance, if you receive a message or call from your son or daughter and they're urgently asking for money to get out of an emergency situation, asking them to provide a pre-agreed passphrase can reveal whether it's really them or even, what situation they're in. So, Erin England, a director of threat analytics at fraud detection firm BioCatch, has touched on this, saying fraudsters will use manipulation techniques to put their victim in a vulnerable state where they act out of panic, urgency, or a strong desire. Having a passphrase or similarly prepared strategy enables victims to quickly validate legitimacy of an unusual interaction and take control. This call to create family passwords or passphrases has come because scammers are increasingly adopting AI. Machine learning has allowed criminals to create deep fake videos impersonating people and to clone voices with only a few seconds of audio. We all remember AI Anna from previous episode. We won't dwell on that.
I didn't need a safe word to know that I didn't like her.
Yeah.
Oh, we should redo AI Anna since it's getting better every year. Just side note, we should do a second AI Anna segment.
You think so? That was scary. I don't like.
Yes.
Yeah.
There are voiceover agencies that have really good AI voices now, and so to create jingles, all you need to do is type out what you want them to say, and then you also add notes about how you want them to say it, and it is incredible the amount of little nuances that they add into the voice. Like, you can make it shout, you can make it go up at the end, you can it's incredible. So I'm sure that is a good use of it. I'm sure scammers and such are using similar things. Yeah, so scammers have used these voice clones to pretend family members have been kidnapped and demand ransom payments for their release. As with your online passwords, there are some things that you should and shouldn't do when creating a shared passphrase. For starters, you shouldn't make a passphrase the same as any of your actual passwords, and they shouldn't be things that a scammer could easily find, such as street names, birthdays, pets, or other personal information. So Rachel Toback, CEO of Social Proof, recommends avoiding joking about your code word in your text messages, social media, or posts. We see folks make a family code word and then it's hashtagged in their Instagram post. That's not a great idea. It's got to be kept private. Who does that? Oh my God. Right.
This is, it's like, hey, look, I just got my new credit card. And it's like a picture of the credit card. It's on that level.
Here's my new driver's license.
Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
So Toback says while family passwords can be useful, it's crucial to be aware of their potential limitations. Toback suggests using a method she calls being politely paranoid, which at its simplest is trying to verify the identity of the person who is contacting you by a second method. So if you receive a call from a nephew who says they are in an accident and need money for legal fees, you can say, 100% I can help you. I just texted you a word. Go ahead and read that out to me. So, do any of you have a family password without obviously telling me what it is?
Yes, it's marshmallow rhinoceros. Like, it's so ridiculous. No one's ever gonna think of it.
Oh, that's a good choice. I should use that.
Yeah, you should. It's really good.
Can I borrow it?
I recommend anyone to use that.
I would have to say no password. And that's even when the kids were little. Like, it was just like, if you don't feel comfortable with it, like, just don't do it. Like, I remember leaving the kids, like, then when they were older, and I'd leave them in the car when I was running into Shoppers or something.
You can't do that.
No, like, when they're 8 or 9 and they're like, I don't want to go in the store with you, Mom. Like not babies. No, babies you drag everywhere. Babies are dragged everywhere. I'm talking about the 8 and 9-year-olds, the snarly ones where you're like, oh God, fine, just stay in the car. I'm just going to get the milk. Stop complaining. And then I'd would leave the keys with them and be like, okay, so if somebody gets in the car, what do you do with the keys? You throw them out the window. Don't let them steal you in the car. Like, you're fine. It's all good. But we're just a very practical family. I don't know.
I think it's something that you could store in one password. And kind of if you ever forget it, you can assure that through Face ID and stuff, only the right people can get to it.
We do have one. Seriously, we do. We've never had chance to use it, but it's nice to know that it exists. I'm not as worried about it anymore, but I think it's probably coming back in terms of my level of concern. In fact, I had a conversation with my mom about this the other day, who is incredibly tech savvy and frequently will hang up on people when she's like, nope, this is not legit. And just click. But I was like, look, if you ever get a call from me that sounds like I'm in trouble, I said, you need to independently verify that before you go and do something that I might be asking for. She's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I think we're good. But yeah, it is something that
I haven't had that conversation, so maybe I need to. That's great.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's more the seniors that I'd want to have the conversation with around if you get this call, take a beat, think about it. Is the lawyer going to call you really and send someone over to your house to get bail money? Is that how the system works here in Canada? Really think about it. But I don't know if so much for the kids. I don't know about your kids, Rue, but they're sending fake AI videos to each other already. And they're already trying to screw with each other as woo, it's fun. I'm I don't know how this is fun. So it's they're very hypercritical of whether or not something's real or fake and all this kind of stuff. So I think it's, again, more for, unfortunately, folks like us, it's got to be that sense of urgency. Take a breath. Remember, again, nobody's showing up at your door to collect iTunes cards to get someone out of bail.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Okay, this one is unconventional cyber attacks aim to take over PayPal accounts. So this is a new phishing campaign that cleverly mimics PayPal to trick users into logging into a fake payment portal. So, what makes this attack unique? Well, it seems to leverage a legitimate Microsoft 365 feature to create a test domain and email distribution list, making the fraudulent payment requests appear authentic. So, cybersecurity expert Carl Windsor first discovered this attack when he received a suspicious request for payment in his inbox. The sender's address appeared non-spoofed and authentic, a significant departure from typical phishing tactics. Windsor noticed that the email, the URLs, and everything else are perfectly valid, making it hard for an average user to spot the deception. At this point, Windsor noted, some folks might be tempted to log in with their account details. However, this would be extremely dangerous because the login page links the target's PayPal account address with the address it was sent to, controlled by the attacker, not their own email address. Once users log in to investigate, their accounts become linked to an attacker-controlled email, granting scammers access to their PayPal accounts. Experts have determined that scammers use free Microsoft 365 test domains to bypass security filters like SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. Messages sent this way resemble standard PayPal payment requests, making it tough for email providers to differentiate between genuine and malicious communications. Windsor emphasized the need for a human firewall, basically employees trained to recognize and handle suspicious emails. He also recommends updating security scanners to detect distribution list-based campaigns and using AI-driven tools to monitor the social graph for unusual interactions. This is an interesting one because we see phishing tactics evolving all the time, but so are the defense strategies. And it seems like a combination of awareness training and advanced detection can actually still help us here. What do we think? Have we ever fallen victim to anything like this or had any issues with PayPal scams or compromises?
I haven't personally because I use 1Password, and 1Password helps me not fill things that aren't the right things. The hard one for me has always been when I get you've received an invoice or you've received a money request. I find that hard as a business because I'm like, is this a service that we've used? Is this something I need to pay? That's where I find I have to use the critical thinking skills because it's not necessarily PayPal per se, but it's those fake invoices where it looks legitimate. It looks like you've bought something, and then I have to now verify, did you buy something on the PayPal account? Did you buy something? That's gotten better now, but yeah, I have not fallen victim to anything like this.
Yeah, I've not fallen victim to something like this, but I'm hyper paranoid. So I very rarely will click on a link in an email unless like I was expecting it because of something I just did. But it is getting better all the time, and it's harder and harder to spot the fakes, especially if they're coming from legit addresses. Like that's one of the things that I always check and stuff like that as well. Check the address and see what's what. But it's always safest to go to the service directly and log in, because if there is something for you to take action on, you will see it when you log into the service directly.
Yeah, I think that's my takeaway from this as well. Like linking accounts from other accounts, it's always the best to go in via the domain that you trust and ensure you're there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
This last one. Subaru security flaws exposes its system for tracking millions of cars. So this one's from Wired.com. About a year ago, Sam Curry, a security researcher, bought his mother a Subaru on the... Who buys their mother a Subaru? Of all the brands to buy, isn't that like a rally racing car? I don't know cars.
No, my mom drives a Subaru.
Really?
Yes.
In my head, that's like, it's got like a spoiler and a front, vent and stuff like that. And
yeah.
You press a button and you kind of glide it around a corner from the back. Does she drive like that?
Yes. No. Yeah. No. She.
Okay.
Part-time rally driver.
What's it called? Drifting. That's it.
Yeah. No. Mama Faye, part-time rally driver.
Okay. All right. So he bought his mother a Subaru on the condition that at some point in the near future she let him hack it. I don't know whether this was the same arrangement you had with your mother, but it took Curry until last November to begin examining the car's internet-connected features and start looking for ways to exploit them. Sure enough, he and a researcher working with him soon discovered vulnerabilities in the Subaru web portal that let them hijack the ability to unlock the car, honk its horn. Right, okay. Immediately, he has the ability, through the web portal, to honk his mother's Subaru's car. I don't know how I could not. Like... just any time. Just any time of day when I'm feeling like a little bit low, I would just log in, press the button.
Yeah.
I couldn't stop myself. That is a terrible, terrible ability. So, and they would start its ignition, reassigning controls of the feature to any phone or any computer they chose. Obviously, those bits are worse than honking the horn. Most disturbing for Curry, though, was the fact that they found that they could also track the Subaru's location, where it was at the moment, but also where it had been for the entire year that his mother had owned it.
Oh.
The map of the car's entire whereabouts was so accurate and detailed, Curry said, that he was able to see her doctor visits, the home of friends that she visited, even which exact car parking space his mother parked in every time she went to church. Curry said, you can retrieve at least a year's worth of location history for a car where it's pinged precisely, sometimes multiple times a day. Whether someone's cheating on their wife or part of a political group, there are millions of scenarios where you could weaponize this against someone. That's what Curry said. That wasn't my opinion there. Let's just be clear. That wasn't my first thought, was like how I could weaponize this against someone.
That wasn't you.
I just wanted to honk the horn. So researchers revealed their hacking methods in a recent blog post, which they believe would have allowed hackers to target any of the company's vehicles equipped with its digital features known as Starlink in the US, Canada, or Japan. Researchers reported their findings to Subaru in late November, and Subaru quickly patched its Starlink security flaws. But Curry's warned that the Subaru vulnerabilities are just the latest in a long series of web-based flaws that they and other security researchers working with them have found in well over a dozen car makers, including Honda, Hyundai, Kia, Toyota, and many others. There's little doubt that they say that similar serious hackable bugs exist in other automotive companies, and they have just yet to be discovered. So two researchers' work contributed to a growing sense of concern over the enormous amount of location data that car companies collect. Privacy researchers at Mozilla Foundation in September warned that in a report that modern cars are a privacy nightmare. noting that 92% of car owners little to no control over the data that they collect, and 84% reserve the right to sell or share your information. While we are worried about our doorbells and watches that connect to the internet, what might be spying on us is our car. And car brands quietly entered the data business by turning their vehicles into powerful data-gobbling machines. The security researchers concluded by saying, it seems that there are a bunch of employees at Subaru that have a scary amount of detailed information. People are being tracked in ways that they have no idea are happening. This, I think, is terrifying, and it makes me thankful that I have an old, busted car.
I had an old, busted car, but now...
Oh, you've got a fancy, shiny one now.
Now, yes, we both have recent model year vehicles.
Did it come with the award?
Yes. Comes with a beautiful laser-engraved wooden block and
right.
a brand new car. And I've really, thought about this recently. I have to go through the menus and make sure that I can disable as much as possible. But me disabling stuff might not be enough because it just might be silently going on.
I find our truck in particular, it's just very robotic. And so it's very much worrisome to think, okay, what else is it doing with what's going on? Because there's microphones in the car and it's listening. And I don't know if you guys have had the experience where you're driving and, you take your phone calls on the road. And so you're like, okay, well, I'm driving to Toronto. I might as well take a bunch of calls. And I do that. Then you're outside somewhere and you're watching a car drive by and you can hear every conversation word that's happening in that car out there. And they're just wrapping up a quick call with there's someone else on a phone in the parking lot. And you're like, I hear everything. And then all of a sudden, all you can think now is if I can hear everything on your phone call, did you hear everything on my phone call?
Yeah.
And that's not even the robot spying on you. That's just you broadcasting your conversation in what you thought was a little soundproof vehicle. That's just you not knowing.
Yep.
Oh, that is terrifying.
Okay. I think it's time to bring in our guest. So let's go to my chat with Emily Crose. We dive into the world of hacker culture through the ages and how hackers have been domesticated and transformed into a geopolitical force. It's a truly fascinating interview, so I think we can just go ahead and drop it in here. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Emily Crose, a veteran cybersecurity professional and now accomplished author. With over a decade of experience working in both offensive and defensive cybersecurity roles, Emily has served in positions at major government agencies, including the CIA and the Department of Homeland Security, where she gained firsthand knowledge of the complex relationship between hackers and the state. She is the author of the recently released Hack to the Future: How World Governments Relentlessly Pursue and Domesticate Hackers, which is a fascinating deep dive into the history of hacker culture and its transformation into a geopolitical force. Emily, this is going to be a fun one today, and I can't wait to get into all of it with you. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This will be great.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of the book, did you want to give us a little bit of an origin story on your career and how you got here?
Yeah, so I've been asked this a couple of times, and I think I got into cybersecurity in the same way that a lot of other people do. Childhood fascination of working with electronics and computers, figuring out how I broke what I broke, how to fix what I broke, and then breaking things intentionally next time. So that's sort of how I found my way into cybersecurity. Yeah, it's been a long journey, but that is where it started, with that fascination. And then it just kind of went down several paths until I get to this bio that you so generously read off.
So with that background, I have to believe that you know the pit of the stomach fear of breaking a computer that you do not own and are going to possibly be in trouble for.
Oh, yeah. The worst is printers has always been the bane of my existence. But yes, I am very familiar with the, oh no, this is broken and I don't know why type of fear.
Yeah, I definitely did that in high school at one point. I quote unquote upgraded the RAM in one of the teacher's computers in a not statically safe way and did not successfully complete that upgrade, which was not a good look for me by any means. So your book explores how hacking culture has changed over the decades, and as we know, hacking started as a niche hobby for many. Can you set the scene as to what hacking looked like in its early form, and what motivated hackers back in the day, and was it as cliche as movies and TV sort of paints it to be?
I think in some ways it is, actually. What motivates, I think, has always motivated hackers has been just a curiosity about how complex systems work. I think we've had hackers throughout time. We tend to think from a cliche perspective that modern hacking started back during the phone phreaker time. And I do mention that in my book, but I tried to take a different approach to start where that lineage started, answering the question of where the lineage started by telling the story of Neville Maskelyne, who was a magician and actually a competitor of Marconi in radio technology. So I sort of start the story back then as a way of saying, hey, we can look at the history of what we now call hackers or consider hackers to be, and compare and contrast what we think of as a hacker today to this individual who back in the early 1900s was doing a lot of the same sort of things that we would recognize with our modern day hacking community, which is to say that those threads have always been there. And I don't think, just to be clear, I don't think that Neville Maskelyne was the first hacker. I think it would be awkward of me to claim that I found the originator, right? What I'm saying is that we've always had that sort of curiosity and almost mischievousness when you read the story of Neville Maskelyne and how he had sabotaged Marconi's demonstrations with radio. That sort of thing has always existed with people. And the complex systems change, but the hackers themselves really don't over time. We've always been the same group of people for the most part.
Has there always been a motivational through line for hacking where it's been a means to gain access to things that people didn't think that they'd have access to, where it plays a role in politics? Or is that a shift that happened over time?
I think that's sort of two separate questions. How it's changed, it's become a geopolitical thing in a more prescient way in the modern age, which is to say since like the 1990s. But even with Neville Maskelyne, radio at that time was developing into a geopolitical technology, a technology that was being used for geopolitics. So they were starting to use radio to coordinate military efforts in different parts of the world, for example. And so that motivation that you point to is from the Maskelyne perspective, from Neville Maskelyne's perspective. I don't think that his interest was in getting access for the sake of getting access, or in his case, the sabotage was actually to prove a point about who owned the technology and the sorts of like business claims that Marconi was making, which is a very different motivation than a geopolitical motivation necessarily. But that component of geopolitics has been there and has a through line through that story because of the way that the technology was being positioned on the world stage. So there is a change that occurs in the 1990s, as I said, that mainstreams hacker motivation to get access to computers because computers are the thing now, and stealing information for the purpose of making a geopolitical point or helping a movement, as hacktivists have. So that's a more modern motivation that we don't really explore a lot of that in the book. And it may be that there are some cases of that you could find over time. But yeah, the thrust of the book really is from the 1970s to about 2015.
Okay. All right. You write about events like the Morris worm and the Melissa virus. How did these incidents change the perception of hackers, both like in the public eye and then also within government agencies?
So around that time, viruses were starting to get more and more attention. From the Melissa virus perspective, I don't know that Melissa had the same level of impact that Morris did, frankly. But the reason that Morris got as much attention as it did is in part because of the sheer speed that it moved. It was able to transmit itself in 48 hours. It had gone from being released to finding its way onto Department of Defense computers, NASA computers. It was so fast moving, and it was so early in the sort of like, I guess what I would describe as like the in the wild type of virus release, because before this time, viruses were being explored in very high-end laboratories in restricted settings. But it wasn't until, you get to the Morris era and the Melissa era of viruses where people outside of laboratories are starting to write viruses and release them, that you start to see how the public reacts to those, because now it's outside of the lab setting and everybody has to deal with this global impact. So that's the first part of the Morris worm's impact. The second part is that Robert Tappan Morris is actually the son of a National Security Agency cryptanalyst, a very well-known cryptanalyst actually and programmer at NSA. And so it also gained a lot of interest because of that connection. And it did turn heads with the government establishment because there were a lot of questions about like how this happened. Why would the son of an NSA cryptanalyst write this piece of code and then release it? It was a purposeful, was it accidental? So there is a through line also there with the public discourse about how this destructive virus made its way out into the public that was a pretty illuminating for government people at that time.
Yeah, I can imagine, and probably a bit professionally embarrassing for Morris himself to have something like this happen.
Certainly was, with the FBI coming to visit him at his work. Yeah, that also was the catalyst that created a more unified response from the government to virus incidents, right? So before this, we didn't even have an organization that was really centrally responsible for responding to virus outbreaks, which it became then, after the Morris worm, the originator of US CERT. So that's how that came to be.
So the book really explores this nuanced relationship between hackers and governments. How would you describe the evolution of this dynamic from adversarial to collaborative?
That was actually the thrust of the book at the beginning. It was me trying to answer that question. How did this weird group of outsiders become an accepted part of major government global policy? So you have, your phone freakers from the 1960s being pursued by state and federal authorities for basically ripping off the phone companies. They considered it a form of toll fraud. So they were being prosecuted for stealing money, essentially, from the phone companies. And that turned into prosecution for other reasons, getting unauthorized access to high-end computer systems, like you see that with other hackers from the 1980s era. So there's a sort of evolution where I describe it as a sort of land bridge from the phone freaker era to the computer hacking era. I know these terms, they kind of make me cringe, but this is the best way to describe it, where you start to see some of these early 1980s and then 1990s era hackers going from phones to computers. And it wasn't really until the 1990s that you see the US government in particular start to take this group of people more seriously. So we have a formalization of sort of rules of the road for hacking come in the late 1980s. 1986, we had the CFAA was signed into law. So that kind of created a legal establishment for this class of individuals who've always been working with computers to work within a more legalized framework. And so once the rules were sort of set down, the law of the land was laid down, federal agencies started to take it more seriously as something that they would prosecute. They kind of overstepped in a couple of situations. And then it was in the late 1990s, 1996, 1997 timeframe that you start to see the US government say, okay, we know that these people are here. We know that they have some amount of leverage over this growing technology that we're all using now. Maybe we should start to look at ourselves and see how much impact they could have on us. And then conversely, how much impact we can have on others. And so that's where we start to see that evolution occur, is like in the late 1990s.
A lot of the, going back to like TVs and movie, the portrayal is that a hacker commits a crime and then the government agents catch them and then say, well, we can commute your sentence if you'll agree to work for us. Is that a common path or is that a sensationalized path?
I think it actually is. It's about right that it's a pretty common path. I don't know that it happens quite that way anymore. What we tend to see, I think, nowadays is because we have so many things like capture the flag events, you have a lot of individuals who sort of develop this skill within a legal framework by doing CTFs, and then they get discovered by government agencies that way these days. That sort of is the more modern recruitment pathway. But yeah, certainly there are plenty of stories throughout the 1990s of hackers getting in trouble for something, and then eventually they sort of like evolve their skill into either consulting business or for working for the government directly. So there's definitely plenty of cases that you could point to where that has happened.
You talk about how different agencies like the NSA and NASA interacted with hackers. Were there any really noticeable differences between their approaches that you called out?
Yeah, there's always been a sort of like a signature way that different agencies deal with the reality of like a breach, right? So like in talking to some hackers from that time frame for this book, it's been described as like breaking into NASA used to be a rite of passage. for a lot of hackers, from the Australian scene to even the Australian hackers in Melbourne would break into NASA just as a rite of passage to, gain credibility. And so you sort of see also I do Freedom of Information Act request, also kind of the origin story of this book comes from asking questions to the government about how these breaches unfolded. And in looking at those documents, you can kind of see how that response evolved over time. So you go from a lot of like handwritten notes by FBI in the wake of a virus investigation from the Melissa virus, for example, handwritten notes with interviews of people who interacted with it, to eventually you have formalized incident reports with cost associations with them in the like late 1990s and early 2000s. So there's also that evolution of formalizing a lot of these things that we see in breaches today. And the documentation that we see with them is a lot more robust now than it used to be.
If we look at the hackers themselves, did you find any similarities or commonalities for motivations or life experiences across all of these folks, and even like differences between folks who describe themselves as black hat hackers versus white hat hackers? Like what did you find there?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you asked that question, because there is something that I noticed in putting this material together. I don't know that I really call it out specifically in the book, but I know of a lot of folks who have entered cybersecurity over the years. And those people, I'm sure, will know who they are when I mention this. Again, not all of them, but many of them experienced a period of homelessness, which I thought was really interesting.
Huh.
It's informal. It's an informal observation. And certainly not everybody who entered cybersecurity had that experience. I didn't have that experience, for example. But I did think it was interesting that so many of my colleagues have experienced that in one form or another on their way into cybersecurity. And I'm not really sure what accounts for that. It's kind of an interesting thing that it would be interesting to look into and see why that is the case. But just as a sort of like off the cuff observation, but definitely other things that you could tie to hacker ethos, I guess you could say, are things like curiosity, good sense of humor, mischief. You see a lot of that throughout the years too, which is something that goes all the way back, like I said, to the Neville Maskelyne early 1900s era.
That's really fascinating. I won't even begin to hypothesize what the connecting thread of homelessness is, but also like that's a really fascinating thing for you to have pulled out there.
Yeah.
Okay, so with the rise of nation-state hackers, and a lot of news coverage today talks about hacking groups as opposed to individual like solo hackers or the romanticized lone genius hacker. Do you think that like individuals as hackers and sort of pulling off large feats is a thing of the past, or does it still happen in certain pockets?
Are you saying you're referring to like stunt hacking? Is that what you're asking about?
Yes. Where like someone will pull off a massive hack and take credit for it, and it's it's the act of a single person as opposed to, oh, this group has infiltrated some ransomware against some institution kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think that's another interesting question. I think that there's just too much money in it now. So you used to see that a lot in past decades, because the business of cybersecurity hadn't really developed to the point where you could make money as an individual. If you didn't graduate from college and you may be on the younger side of things, as we know, young people are just as intelligent with computers and breaking them as people have been doing this for many years. I'm rusty these days, but younger hackers are just as adept at doing this sort of thing. And I think that they've found ways of monetizing that better than we used to be able to. So I think that era is over in the way that we remember it from the 2010s era or the 2000s era, where these big elaborate pranks could be done and grab a lot of attention. I mean, we still see some of that, but I don't know that we'll see another crew like Lizard Squad from the 2010s or Lulzsec, for example. Like those types of groups, they harken back to a time where the bar to entry for exploitation was a lot lower than it is right now because of just how much money is involved in it. It's really hard to turn down the type of money that's being thrown around for like a really good exploit these days. B, the legitimacy that you can get by, accepting that money and then building a career off of it. And then C, just the sheer complexity of hacks these days. Like, the cybersecurity industry has really raised the bar in the past 20 years. And the turnaround time for remediation or response for a severe bug has just become so much better than it ever was before. Like, we are absolutely not living in the same era of security that we were 20 years ago. So at that stage, I really have to give a pat on the back to everybody who's made that a reality. So I don't think that we'll see a whole lot of that anymore, but it has moved. I should remark that it has moved from the public stage to capture the flag exercises. You even see like pwn to own is where a lot of stunt hacking happens these days. You see a lot of that happening in that scene. So it's not something that's completely disappeared. But there's just more legitimate pathways to showcasing those types of hacking skills.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. What lessons do you think that other governments or even private citizens can learn from the way that the U.S. has domesticated hacking culture? Is this something that is unique to us? I can't imagine that it actually is. Like, this has to be something that's happening the world over.
Yeah. So that's one thing I do mention in the book, is tracking that. We've got so many books that cover the history of the United States and how the United States responded to hackers. I also wanted to take a look at how other countries sort of tracked their own pathway through their relationship with hackers. So, like, one example I could give of the way that you do it wrong is in the 1990s, France had done an operation like a sting operation against hackers in their own country, and ended up burning a lot of bridges very early on between the French government and hackers that I think they are still, to some extent, feeling the effect of today. They may be improving it, but 20, 30 years is a really long time to burn bridges with your own localized communities like that. And so the lesson that you take away from that is it's better to be constructive with these individuals and not even necessarily lenient, but at least understanding enough of the gray area that a lot of hackers operate within to work with them rather than against them. So there are plenty of examples that I mentioned in the book where government agencies like the Secret Service went about doing stings in really destructive ways that ended up hurting that relationship more than helping it. And so you see that relationship repair over the span of maybe 15 to 20 years, where they build those bridges up with hackers by attending the conferences, bringing hackers into the fold, listening to the responses of like what's reasonable to prosecute, what's reasonable to act with a softer approach, what types of activities may require a softer approach. I think those are the lessons that governments should look at as examples of a productive relationship with their technical talent, rather than being adversarial all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that it's really interesting to hear that there are groups that basically, like, the Capitol has just been burned, and it's like, no, sorry, like, we're not able to repair this relationship.
Yeah.
And whereas we've really been able to bring it in-house to a degree.
Yes.
Okay, this question might seem a little crass, but what does cyber war actually look like? What are the risks, not only for the governments and the countries and the citizens involved, but the hackers themselves?
Cyber war is one of those things that has come up many different ways over the years, and the way that people think about it has evolved over time. We used to think of cyber war as countries attacking other countries and getting access to basically information that could be used to attack other countries with. I think that idea, it changed from that to, can a government turn off the lights in another country, for example? We've seen a lot of examples of that type of behavior in different theaters around the world. And the ones that I'm thinking about specifically predate the current conflict in Ukraine, or were an extension of this current conflict in Ukraine, when Russia attacked the Ukrainian territory by turning off the lights in Kyiv, for example. So it was a component in that attack. It was a bit ominous or predictive of a conflict that would come later. And I think what we have to start thinking about in terms of cyber conflict is less of, is cyber war its own discrete thing, or is it a smaller component of a more robust military engagement? And that, I think, is where we have to start from a policy perspective. We have to start thinking of cyber war and cyber conflict in general. It's a smaller part of armed conflict, In the same way that, like airplanes changed the battlefield, this will change the battlefield in a commensurate way. Whether it will be a major or a minor part of conflicts of the future, I think is an open question. But we can't look at cyber warfare as something that happens once and that's the end of it. When we think about it, we look at it as a component of a larger conflict, or either that way or as a component of more robust information warfare or influence campaign. So those are two very diverging ideas that we sort of, these days, we generalize as cyber warfare, but the activities associated with each and the responses to each are very different. So I think we have to kind of evolve our thinking about this and stop being worried about one or the other. It's all of the above and coming up with policy that can govern both individually.
Nice. Yeah, that makes sense. We've talked a lot about national security. Are there any groups that have a more global focus and looking at sort of like a bigger picture that is potentially more unifying?
There are plenty of examples of that you can point to over the years that have taken a more global approach to their activity. So I mentioned LulzSec before. They had some of that. Anonymous, of course, to the extent that was like a discrete organization, which it really wasn't. They also took a more global approach in their activities than a nationalist approach. So it's changed over time as well. I think most of those groups have become folded in with some other form of like national intelligence, someone's national intelligence apparatus in the later years. But there was likely a component of that throughout all of these. And again, I mentioned some of these examples in my book where members of LulzSec had been recruited by FBI to act as informants, and Anonymous themselves had likely been infiltrated by intelligence organizations long ago. So I think it's hard to separate that. There will always be a thread of national security interest that runs through these, whether you like there to be or not. Reality is very messy in that way.
Indeed, yeah. In the book, you also talk about, speaking of things that are messy, the ethical complexities of working with the government. Do you have any advice for cybersecurity professionals or ethical hackers who might be wary of getting involved in this way and certainly are aware of those ethical complexities?
Yeah, the ethical complexities are just something that you can't avoid. It's not even as a hacker, it's as anybody who works with the government. There's an inextricable link to the effort that you put into a nationalist project. Not to get too political, but anytime that you're working with the government, that's always going to be a question. You know, whether you are doing exploitation on behalf of the government or if you are doing accounting on behalf of the government, there's always going to be that question, that ethical question of, am I doing the right thing? It just happens to be, I think, more prescient and heavier with certain jobs. So within the military, for example, whether you are ending somebody's life on the battlefield, that can be one of those ethical considerations that people do have to consider their role in. The best thing that I can say is follow your own ethics and morals on that pathway. You don't have to work with the government if you don't feel like it's a project that's worthy of your attention, but know that you will always be operating within the context of some form of government surveillance, and act accordingly is really the best thing I can say about that.
That's good advice. All right, let's bring it home with perhaps the most important question. Where can people go to find the book and perhaps even learn a bit more about you?
Yeah, for sure. So my website is one place that you can go to learn more about me, hexadecimate with an 8 instead of ATE.com. There's also links to different places where you can buy the book in hard copy if you'd like. It is available on Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or direct to the publisher at Wiley. Also excited to announce that we are going to have an audiobook version coming on February 25th. So if you prefer to consume your long-form content in audio form, it should be available on all major audiobook retailers as well. So very excited to have that available as well.
Who is reading the audiobook?
I've been asked that so many times, and I do not know. I don't know who the narrator is, unfortunately. It's killing me, because I really wish I could give people an answer to that question, but I don't know who it is. It's not me.
It's not you. Okay, gosh.
It's not me.
I would assume that if it was someone with any sort of fame or notoriety, you would know at this point. Like if you had...
Yeah, I would love to have, several different people read it, but I don't know who it is. I don't know who they got.
Well, fingers crossed for either Will Wheaton or, of course, Attenborough. I think that would be just wonderful. Yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, well, listen, Emily, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining in today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much. It's been fun.
All right. Well, thank you for that interview. With that being done, let's jump into Ask 1Password, our advice segment where you can ask Rue anything. This is where your listener questions, whether they be security related or midlife crisis related, can be asked. So this week we have an email from Julia who asks, "Hello, Matt, Sarah, Rue, and Anna too. I have a quick question for Agony Aunt Rue." Oh, I wonder if she meant that to rhyme. "I have a 1Password Families account free through my work, but I don't want to have work access my personal passwords. Is there a way to separate the two accounts? Looking forward to the new season. Thanks, Julia."
Oh,
that's a good question.
Yeah, no, this is a great question and a really common misconception, which was funny for me to learn because as an employee here and someone who helped build all of this, it was incredibly obvious to me, but very clearly not obvious to everybody else, that just because you have a family account that is effectively paid for by your work, they do not have access to that account. That account is a completely separate 1Password account that your work does not control. So your question, is there a way to separate the two accounts? Yes, that is how they are designed. Those two accounts are already separate. Anything that you put in your 1Password Families account will not be accessible by your work. Now, the only impact that you will have if you change jobs or move on from this role is that you will need to go through a transition period where you end up paying for your account. So your family account will no longer be paid for by your work, and you'll have to take over the billing aspects. But other than that, you don't have to worry about any sort of access by the company whatsoever.
Yeah, it's basically like a coupon code that goes on your thing, like a promo on your family account.
Yep.
I think the main thing is if you end up not paying attention when you're saving stuff, if you're working from home and you've got your work machine and you've got stuff up, like you want to make sure that you're putting your work stuff in your work stuff and you're putting your family stuff in your family vault, because that's the only real crossover that you might have.
Yeah, that's true. And we've put in some checks lately in recent versions that look out for that stuff on your behalf. So there's some common domains and things like that.
I know. It's awesome.
Yeah. We're like, hey, did you want to put this in your work account? Or hey, did you want to put this in your personal account? The separation, even if you sign into both on the same phone, computer, whatever, they do not share information between them. But as Sarah said, you can mistakenly put stuff in the wrong account. But again, like we try and catch it and watch out for it.
Yeah, the little pop-ups have been very helpful for me lately.
Oh, I'm glad.
Where it's like, hey, are you sure you think this is where it should be? And it's like, okay, yeah, I'll clean up my stuff. I'm getting there. I'll get there. Well, thank you, Julia, for the question. And if you have any questions that need some answers or you could use any life advice, please send an email to podcast@1password.com. And you can include your name or remain anonymous, and we'll be happy to do what we can to help.
All right. It is time for us to play alternative security questions. Traditional security questions like, what is your mother's maiden name and what was your first pet's name, are boring and, not to mention, easily crackable. So here, we get to suggest some alternative security questions with less predictable answers. Contestants, you are creating fake answers to obscure questions, trying to outwit the hosts by occasionally slipping in real answers unnoticed. And me, the host, is awarding points for my favourite answer based on comedy or creativity. The host also must try to detect if any of the answers played are real or not. We're going to play 3 rounds and answer 3 alternative security questions. When we playtested this recently, we argued over whether or not should be a democracy or a dictatorship over the best answer, which in itself, I think, says a lot about us. Also, we have a new jingle. Are you ready? Should I play it?
Oh, I'm so ready. Let's go.
I can't wait.
Okay.
It's alternative security questions, the game show that answers the questions that no one asked for. When your mother's maiden name just won't do, and your first pet's getting boring too, we've got new ones for you. Like,
what's the ugliest animal at the zoo?
what was your ex-girlfriend's favorite shampoo? It's alternative security questions, the game show that answers the questions that no one asked for.
All right. This week's alternative security questions. Number one, first one to Sarah. If you were a breakfast cereal, what would your tagline be?
I struggled with this because we get these in advance this week. And so my first thought was no thanks, because I don't eat breakfast. I don't enjoy breakfast. So it would just be like a box.
You as a breakfast
No
cereal,
thanks.
no thanks.
Like, no thanks. It's dinner time. Like, it's,
I like that.
either that or it would be something like this again, because I am also a creature of habit. So if I'm going to eat this today, I'm going to eat it tomorrow, and I'm going to eat it the day after that.
I'm really bad for that. Getting into loops.
I don't think it would fly off the shelves.
Okay. I don't think no thanks is flying off the shelves.
I don't think it is.
Rue, how about yourself?
My tagline for my breakfast cereal, it's got to be like something like Nutty Crunchy, I think, is really what it's going to end up being. Just Nutty Crunchy.
Okay.
I feel like you've missed a branding opportunity with Rue. It's Rue for you.
It's Rue for you.
Is that your shampoo, maybe?
You know what? That's better. I'm changing my answer.
Okay. I'm keeping score, but I will announce the scores at the end.
Oh, great.
So number two, Sarah, what's your most irrational fear?
Windmills.
Okay.
Like the power turbines on, like, not the old traditional Dutch windmills, like the newer 3 turbines, the creepy red light that blinks on them in the middle of the darkness, and they're on either side of the highway, and you're just waiting for them to come flying off and kill you.
So that's it. It's that they're gonna, like, a blade is gonna come whipping off of there.
Oh, it's coming for you. They're gonna turn into robots. There's something horrible gonna happen. It's done.
I think that one might actually be true. I think we're definitely getting into the truthful territory there.
Yep.
Okay, Rue, what's your most irrational fear?
Yeah, so I'm going to say a thing that I think is going to ring very true to any child of the 90s, which is driving behind a logging truck.
Oh.
Yes.
Final Destination.
Yes, I am terrified of being Final Destination.
I change lanes. Or pull over. I genuinely do.
Yeah, no, I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no joke. That stuff is awful.
Oh, that is terrifying.
It's terrifying.
Yep.
I don't think that's an irrational fear.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's just a real fear.
I think that means I win that question.
Okay, fine. Koalas.
Oh,
All right.
I'm on the scores. We'll get there. Okay. So number 3, Sarah, what's the most ridiculous thing you've ever Googled that you can say on a podcast? I'm going to add that bit on the end there.
I don't think there's anything. This is like is there such thing as a stupid question? I have no idea. Like, I would have to say, what day is it today? Like, I don't know. I don't know what you would Google that would be ridiculous, because if you're Googling it, it's because you don't know.
I Google what the weather is when I'm in the place. And, like, I'm not looking for the weather in the future. I'm looking for the weather right now. I've done that many times.
In Canada, you have to. What's the wind chill? You can't tell the wind chill from looking out your window.
Oh, in England, it's wet or not wet. That's really what I'm looking at. Like, am I putting on an umbrella into my bag, or am I not? That's the question I'm looking to answer. Okay, so what day it is? I think that's a good answer.
I need inspiration. What has Rue got?
I'm sorry, there's only one right answer to this question, and it is, are cherries a berry? That's the most ridiculous thing.
Nice.
Okay.
That's a good answer.
We've got some points here.
Yeah.
Okay, so first of all, for no thanks, I think Sarah gets 50 points. For the morning ruse, I'm going to go minus 25. Because minus 25 for that ruse.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay, 4, what was your irrational fear? I think they were actually both true. I think Sarah and logs and windmills, I think, not that irrational, but I think they were very true fears. I'm going to give Sarah 100 points. And then Rue 150, because I definitely felt that in my stomach.
Okay.
And then, what's the most ridiculous thing you've ever Googled? Sarah, I'm going to give you 50 points for that. The day is good. But, like, I think our cherries are berry. 125 points for that.
Yeah.
I believe that sounds like a correct score.
Was I correct in both of those irrational fears being true?
Oh, yes, 100%.
100%.
Yeah, there we go. All right, we're going to add those points on to more points that won't matter, and we will see you next time on Alternative Security Questions.
Woohoo. But before we go, don't leave yet. In celebration of our new season and our new game, we would like to hear your alternative security questions. So please write to the show with your most creative security questions. We will pick 3 of our favorites and play them in alternative security questions on a future episode. All 3 winners will receive 1 free year of 1Password for families. Please send your entries and your alternative security questions to podcast@onepassword.com and reference the Random But Memorable giveaway. The giveaway is now open and closes on February 4th, so you only have 1 week to get your questions in. You can see all the terms and conditions in the episode show notes below.
So we're allowed to do this now. This is Anna outsourcing her job to the audience. We're allowed to do, can we all do that?
We're just getting listener feedback. We want to hear what they think is ridiculous.
I think ideas, crowdsourced here are brilliant.
I would like to have some assistance on developing my OKRs for this year. If anyone could send those in.
You can receive 1 year free of 1Password if you email in Sarah's OKRs for her, and she doesn't have to do them. That's not in the terms and conditions, by the way. All right. Well, I think it's all to say is love you both.
Love you both.
Love you both.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also leave us a rating or review. It's one of the best ways to support Random But Memorable, and we always love reading your feedback. We're also a community-led podcast, so if you have any questions for us, topic requests, or even guests you'd like to hear from, please send us an email at podcast@onepassword.com. We read all of your comments and look forward to hearing from you. We hope you'll join us for the next episode with plenty more random moments in the wide world of cybersecurity.